Hey everybody, Andy Cavernan here with another Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. I watched a show recently that was set in the 1960s with the main characters who were astronauts. And actually it was the astronauts' families that were on display. And I don't know if this was actually true, but the way the show portrayed it was there was a lot of pressure for the astronauts and their families in the 1960s to maintain an image. They were all-American families. They had it made. They had fame. They had excitement. They had it all. And yeah, the show portrayed the families as struggling in very different ways depending on the family, but struggling nonetheless, but also struggling not only with their struggles, but with their ability to be transparent about those struggles. And it reminded me that human nature often is such where we try to put up appearances. We try to demonstrate our worth, our value to whatever organization, to whatever culture we're in. And we try to fit in, frankly, and that can be exhausting. And it reminds me of a story from Matthew 19, the rich young ruler. I'm sure we've talked about it before, where this young man who seemingly has it all comes to Jesus with the hopes that Jesus will validate his entry into the kingdom, but instead he's met with some resistance. In fact, he's met with a question. Jesus says, why do you ask me about what is good? There's only one who's good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments. He's entered with this challenge by Jesus. Look, if you want to be a part of the kingdom, you need to keep the commandments. And of course the man says, well, I've kept everything. But then Jesus answers this. So the man says, all these I have kept, verse 20, what do I still lack? And then Jesus answers, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Jesus says, if you want to be perfect, and I've read this story multiple times in different Gospels and here in Matthew. And this phrase really stood out to me this morning as I was reading. If you want to be perfect. If your aim is perfection, well then here's what you can do. It's fascinating as we read this story and even the stories around it, where just a few verses earlier, Jesus has little children brought to him, and his disciples are all indignant about it. But he says, let the children come to me and don't hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Jesus seems to be contrasting these little children who can't even come close to claiming perfection. They've done nothing other than just exist. But they come into the arms of Jesus as those humble and innocent. He's comparing them, contrasting them perhaps with this rich young man who seemingly has everything. And yet in his pursuit of perfection, he still falls short. But because he's so tied to pursuing perfection, he can't get over himself. And in fact, he can't come in humble dependence to Jesus. And there's this passage in Mark that's sort of set in similar fashion. The rich young ruler is very close here. And there's a story of the blind man, Bartimaeus, who receives his sight. And again, another contrast with the rich young ruler. And in chapter 10, verse 46, it starts describing this man Bartimaeus who's crying out to Jesus and won't take no for an answer. And finally he gets Jesus' attention, and Jesus notices and he says, call him. And so they brought Bartimaeus to Jesus. And it's interesting what happens here. Verse 49, Jesus stopped and he said, call him. So they called to the blind man, cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you. And then verse 50, get this, throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. I mean, can you picture the rich young ruler coming to Jesus with his cloak intact? He's probably dressed to the nines, formal as all get out, trying to prove his place, as opposed to this man Bartimaeus, who's just been chastised by the crowd, and yet he's relentless. And finally, when he gets Jesus' attention and Jesus invites him, he doesn't come with dignity. He chucks off his cloak. I'm not going to let anything encumber me from getting to Jesus. And he runs to Jesus. In essence, he runs into Jesus' arms. Friends, I'm here to tell you, if you're trying to impress Jesus, if you want to be perfect, you're going to be disappointed. Because you can't earn your place with Jesus. What you can do is chuck off your cloak, chuck off your pretense, let it go, and run into his arms. Be like a little child. Be like Bartimaeus, and invite Jesus to do what only he can do. Jesus can cloak you in his righteousness. He did for Bartimaeus. He made him see, and I think there's an implication there that he brought Bartimaeus into the faith. He says, your faith has healed you. Jesus is affirming Bartimaeus' faith. So he threw off his earthly coat. He donned a spiritual heavenly coat, the coat of righteousness made available through Jesus. Have you been dressed in Jesus' righteousness today? Let him dress you in his righteousness. Let him be enough for you. You no longer need to put on pretense. He has been perfect for you.